Okay, let's jump right in. Have you ever heard of the Rashomon Effect? It's this incredibly fascinating concept where one single event or situation can be interpreted in wildly different ways, completely depending on who's looking at it and what specific lens they're looking through. Well, in this explainer, we're applying that exact concept part 2 of Dr. Jomes Robert Bitter's text on family counseling theories. If you're working on your lesson 2 comparative assignment right now, well, you're in the absolute perfect place. We're going to take one single family struggles, but we're going to examine them through multiple, highly distinct therapeutic lenses just to see how completely differently these foundational theories operate in the real world.
But to really ground these complex theories, we first need a human story, right? So let's meet our clients, the Quest family. We have Jane, the mother. She's completely overwhelmed and feels like her family is just falling apart. Then there's Paul, the father. He's disconnected, distant, and pretty much entirely absorbed in his role as the traditional breadwinner. They've got 2 older daughters, Amy and Anne, but they already have their own independent lives going on. The immediate glaring problem, though, centers around their 2 young sons, Jason and Luke. They're exhibiting highly aggressive, even explosive behavior. It's a blended, complicated family in a lot of distress. So how do we actually help them? Well, it depends entirely on the theoretical lens we choose to put on.
Here is our roadmap for this explainer. 1. Lens 1, strategic counseling. 2. Lens 2, solution-oriented counseling. 3. Lens 3, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBFT. And 4, we'll wrap up with the broader cultural and gender lens. Starting right off with Lens 1, strategic counseling. Brace yourself because this approach uses a very assertive, almost aggressive pacing. It really mirrors its intense focus on power dynamics and family hierarchy. To understand where this vibe comes from, we have to look at its lineage. Strategic family counseling didn't just pop up out of thin air. It evolved from the early structural foundations laid down by Salvador Minuchin, who was, deeply focused on family boundaries. From there, pioneers like Jay Haley and the MRI group took the baton. They took that idea of family structure and zeroed right in on covert power struggles and the clever little strategies family members use to control each other. The absolutely crucial thing to grasp here is the core assumption of this lens. In strategic family counseling, the therapist is basically the boss. Think of them like a strict referee stepping onto a really chaotic field. It is a highly directive approach. The counselor assumes full responsibility for making change happen. They are not going to just sit back and wait for the family to organically find their way. No way. They step right in to actively realign faulty hierarchies. Like, say, when an 8-year-old is somehow wielding more power than a parent, and they issue very specific, calculated instructions to shut down those power struggles. Picture this. The Quest family walks into the room with a strategic therapist. That therapist is absolutely not going to spend the first hour gently asking about everyone's feelings. Instead, the dialogue starts abruptly. The counselor sits down, looks right at Paul and Jane, and asks, point blank, "So what's the problem? What brought all of you here today?" It's a totally calculated move. By asking this out of the gate, the therapist immediately gets to observe who speaks first, who talks over who, and who really holds the power. It lets them rapidly map out the family hierarchy.
Which brings us to an incredible philosophical contrast. On one hand, we have the strategic focus, right? The therapist takes charge to aggressively fix a clearly defined problem. But what if we completely flip that script? Over on the solution-focused side, the therapist actually partners up with the family. They collaborate not to fix a past problem, but to actively build a future solution.
Moving right along to Lens 2, solution-oriented counseling. This brings a totally different, way more optimistic vibe into the room. Emerging during the postmodern transition, the key heavy hitters for this collaborative model were pioneers like Steve DeShazer, Insoo Kim Berg, and William O'Hanlon. They fundamentally challenged the old-school idea that you have to endlessly psychoanalyze a problem for years just to solve it. Instead, they brought in a completely new core assumption. Solution-oriented counseling is, at its heart, a collaborative method. It intentionally rips the focus away from obsessing over the past or dwelling on the misery of the problem. Instead, the therapist and the family roll up their sleeves and work together to rapidly co-construct future solutions. They hunt for what they call exceptions, those rare, fleeting times when the problem, like Jason and Luke's aggressive outbursts, actually isn't happening. Then they try to build on those little moments of peace. The whole mindset shifts from, man, why is this happening to us, to, okay, how can we fix this together? And here's how that actually sounds in a session with the Quests.
Instead of letting Jane just drown in her exhaustion, the solution-oriented counselor hits her with a scaling question. They ask, how would you rate your confidence level that you and Paul, working together, can help this happen? And Jane, who literally walked in feeling completely overwhelmed, thinks for a second and says, it's already at a 7. Just by shifting the language to focus on potential and teamwork, the counselor manufactures immediate hope and momentum.
So we've seen the strategic lens, which is highly directive, and the solution-oriented lens, which is super fluid, rapid, and future-focused. Now let's contrast that collaborative style with our third approach. While solution models are all about throwing out quick options, cognitive behavioral models rely on the deeply structured, analytical tracking of baseline behaviors and ingrained thoughts. That brings us to Lens 3, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, or CBT for short.
Championed by folks like Frank D'Attilio and Aaron Beck, this approach takes the clinical precision of cognitive psychology and drops it right into the messy, chaotic dynamics of family life. A CBFT therapist operates kind of like a mix between an educator and a scientist. They follow a very logical, step-by-step playbook. Step 1, assess the baseline. What are the automatic thoughts and behaviors actually happening here? Step 2, cognitive reorientation. This is where they help parents recognize their own unhelpful thought loops. Step 3 involves setting up concrete, actionable behavioral strategies. And Step 4, the family has to actually go practice these new skills at home and evaluate what happens. The ultimate endgame here is forging a unified, highly functional parental team.
When a CBFT therapist looks at Jane and Paul Quest, they don't just see a surface-level power struggle or a family needing a quick fix. They spot deeply ingrained dysfunctional cognitive roles. According to the text, the Quests have fallen into exaggerated and stereotyped roles. Jane is operating as the completely over-involved mother, carrying literally all the domestic burden, while Paul is just functioning as the withdrawn, traditional breadwinner father. CBFT argues that until these deeply held underlying cognitive beliefs about their roles are challenged and restructured, the boy's behavior simply isn't going to change in the long run. Finally, let's step back for the cultural and gender lens. Because really, where do those stereotyped roles even come from in the first place? As championed by pioneers like Monica McGoldrick, Betty Carter, and various feminist practitioners, this perspective argues that you simply cannot look at a family in a vacuum. We absolutely have to evaluate how our therapeutic theories either account for or completely actively ignore the multi-generational, cultural, and gender dynamics that shape a family's day-to-day reality. Think about it. For decades, early counseling models operated on these massive, unchecked assumptions. They basically assumed a family was always a white, middle-class nuclear unit with a breadwinner dad and a stay-at-home mom. But modern reality? It's entirely different. Families today are beautifully diverse, they're blended, they're culturally complex. If a therapist ignores systemic realities like poverty, racial discrimination, or societal gender expectations, they're literally only treating half the picture.
Let's apply that broader feminist and multicultural lens directly to the Quests. Suddenly, Jane's exhaustion isn't just some clinical symptom we need to fix. It's a direct product of the societal gender burden that tells us childcare is solely a woman's job. Paul's distance? It isn't just a behavioral quirk. It's conditioned male breadwinner behavior that's been historically rewarded by patriarchal structures. This lens really forces us to compassionately explore the complexities of their blended family. It makes us acknowledge that the power imbalances causing their distress are deeply, deeply rooted in traditional societal structures, not just individual failings.
Okay, let's pull all of this together. If you're outlining your Lesson 2 assignment right now, this is basically your ultimate synthesis rubric. It perfectly maps out the components you need for a systemic analysis. We've got strategic theory from Haley, aiming to realign hierarchies with a highly directive therapist. We've got solution-oriented theory from DeShazer and Berg, aiming to generate rapid options with a collaborative therapist. And we've got CBFT from D'Attilio, aiming for cognitive reorientation with the therapist acting as an educator. That is 3 entirely different, richly developed ways to help the exact same family. Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway from Dr. Bitter's text. There is no single, magical, correct theory that works perfectly for every family in every situation. The true art of family counseling? It lies in understanding these varied frameworks, recognizing their blind spots when it comes to culture and gender, and learning how to seamlessly integrate them. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on as you write your assignment. Which theoretical lens, or maybe your own personal synthesis of a few lenses, will you choose to best serve the unique, messy, beautiful reality of your future clients? Keep analyzing, keep questioning, and keep exploring.